When our newborn son arrived 10 weeks early, I thought the trauma of his early birth would bring my husband and me closer. Instead, it exposed a terrifying truth: I was the only one truly fighting for our child. In the sterile silence of the NICU, I watched over our baby day and night, while my husband slipped away, first emotionally, then physically. The final straw came on a Saturday morning when he chose a round of golf over our son's fragile heartbeat. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. This is the story of how I discovered what love really means. And how betrayal can show up in a polo shirt and golf cleats. The first time I heard the machine's beep, I thought my heart would stop right there with his. Our son, Theo, came into this world in silence, no cries, no flailing limbs, just a blue, terrifying stillness. I remember the nurse yelling for oxygen, the way the doctor's face twisted as he worked on him. I remember holding my breath for what felt like hours until the tiniest sound emerged from that tiny, helpless body. That was the first time I thought we might lose him. And yet, somehow, that moment wasn't the worst. The worst came later, when Theo was transferred to the NICU. I didn't leave his side. I slept in the chair, held the tubes when they tangled, whispered stories into his incubator. I counted every breath, memorized every pattern on his skin. My body was wrecked from the emergency C-section, but I couldn't think about the pain. All that mattered was him. My husband, Jordan, came the first few days. He brought coffee and updates from home. He kissed my forehead, said the right things. But he never looked at Theo for more than a minute. He hovered near the door. His hands stayed in his pockets. At first, I told myself he was scared. I was terrified too. Watching your child hooked up to machines isn't something you prepare for. I thought maybe he just needed time to process, to catch up emotionally. But then the excuses started. There's nothing I can do here, he said one evening, glancing at his phone instead of our son. You're the one he needs. I'll just be in the way. I didn't argue. Not yet. I was too exhausted to fight, and somewhere deep down, I still hoped he'd come around. But over the next few days, he came less. Always with a reason: meetings, errands, needing a break, and then came that Saturday. Theo had a bad night. His oxygen dipped 3 times. The nurse called it normal for preemies, but her eyes looked worried. I didn't sleep. I held his tiny hand through the hole in the incubator and counted every rise and fall of his chest. At 7:45 a.m., I texted Jordan, rough night. Can you come early today? I need you. He didn't reply. By 10 a.m., I called. Voicemail. At noon. I got a text back, sorry, babe. Last minute tea time with the guys. I'll swing by after. At tea time. While our son fought for every breath, his father was drinking beers and chasing a ball on a manicured lawn. I sat there, staring at the message, and something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not in some dramatic burst. It was quiet. Cold. Final. Like the slow turn of a deadbolt. That night, I waited until the hallway was empty. I asked the nurse if I could update the emergency contact information. She gave me the clipboard. I scratched out his name. In its place, I wrote my sister's. I didn't cry, I didn't tell him, I just watched Theo's chest rise and fall, and I whispered to him, you'll never be alone again. Not if I can help it. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Jordan's decision to go golfing wasn't just about selfishness. It was about something darker. Something that had already started unraveling behind my back, and it was going to destroy more than just trust. It was going to tear apart everything I thought I knew about the man I married. The day after I changed the emergency contact, I waited for Jordan to notice. He didn't. Or if he did, he didn't say a word. He came to the hospital around 5 p.m., looking fresh-faced and sun-kissed. His hair still held the shape of his golf cap. He kissed my cheek like nothing had happened and handed me a smoothie. Like a gesture could cancel out absence. I wanted to scream, to throw the cup across the room, but Theo was sleeping. The rhythmic beep of the monitor grounded me. I kept my voice calm. You played well? I asked. He smiled like a boy. Crushed it. First birdie on that course. That's when I knew he didn't get it. Not at all. Not what it meant to leave me alone with a struggling newborn. Not what it meant to choose leisure over life. His son had nearly coded, and Jordan's pride was tied to a birdie. A freaking birdie. I watched him through new eyes that evening. The way he kept checking his phone, how he barely looked at Theo. He stayed for 20 minutes, maybe 30, before claiming he was wiped and needed to lie down. Said he'd be better tomorrow. He wouldn't be that night. I did something I never imagined I'd do. I checked his iPad. I knew his passcode. I shouldn't have, but I did. The background was a photo from the golf course. Him and two of his friends, grinning in a selfie, the greens stretching behind them. My son had tubes in his nose. Jordan had a cocktail in hand. The iMessages told me what I didn't want to see. Not just tea times. Not just banter. There were photos. Selfies from a sports bar. A waitress in a tight polo shirt. A message that read, "You ever get out of that hospital?" Another, "Tell your wife to take a break. She's making the rest of us look bad." Then the worst, one from Jordan himself, sent 2 nights ago, while I'd been holding Theo through a DSAT episode. Honestly, sometimes I think she wants him to be sick, so she can play the martyr. I couldn't breathe. I scrolled, numb, through weeks of messages. He wasn't just escaping the hospital. He was mocking it. Mocking me. And somewhere, maybe even convincing himself he was right. That my devotion to our son was a performance. That I was the dramatic one. I closed the iPad and just sat there, staring at the NICU ceiling, counting each breath Theo took. That's when I realized something brutal. He didn't love this baby. Not like I did. Not like a father should. Jordan loved the idea of being a dad, when it was easy, photogenic, safe. Not when it was messy and terrifying and full of unknowns. He hadn't abandoned us for golf, he'd abandoned us because the story got too real. The next morning, I told the nurses he wouldn't be visiting that day. I needed the space. I didn't respond to his texts, didn't mention the messages I'd seen. I needed to think, but that same afternoon, while I held Theo's impossibly small body against mine for kangaroo care, a nurse knocked lightly on the curtain. "There's a woman asking for your husband. She says she's his coworker?" I stiffened. "Is she here?" She nodded. "Lobby." She asked where the baby was. Should I let her in? I felt Theo stir against my chest. I pulled the blanket higher over his back and whispered in his ear. Then I looked at the nurse. "Tell her she can come in," I said, because I wanted to see her face. I wanted to look into the eyes of the woman my husband thought was worth more than his son. Wasn't ready for what she'd say, or what she knew. She walked into the NICU like she belonged there. No hesitation. No awkwardness. Her heels clicked against the sterile floor with the kind of confidence that made my stomach twist. Her hair was neat, her blouse tucked in perfectly, and she carried a gift bag, blue tissue paper spilling out of the top. Not a visitor, not a presence. She stopped at the curtain, smiled like we were old friends, and said, "Hi, I'm Elise. You must be Jordan's wife." I nodded slowly, shifting Theo gently in my arms. He was asleep on my chest, his fragile body wrapped tightly in a blanket against my skin. "I just wanted to drop something off," she continued, holding out the bag. "For Theo." The name hit me like a slap. I had never posted it. Never shared it with anyone outside of family. And Jordan hadn't posted anything either. He wasn't the sentimental type online. Which meant he told her. Which meant they were more than coworkers. More than flirty messages. This wasn't random. This was intimate, thanks, I said, not taking the bag. She hesitated, then placed it on the nearby table. He talks about you both all the time, she added, looking down at Theo. He said it's been really hard. I stared at her. Hard. The word thudded in my chest like an insult. Jordan had skipped NICU visits for golf and margaritas, and now this woman was standing here, telling me how hard it had been for him. What is it exactly you do at work? I asked. She blinked. Oh, we're in the same department. Marketing. He's on my team. Right, I said. And how long have you two been close? She looked caught. Just for a second. Then she covered it with a polite smile. I wouldn't say close. We just work well together. And share personal details? The smile faltered. I leaned slightly, adjusting Theo's weight so she could see the wires and the feeding tube. Do you know what a CPAP is, Elise? She didn't answer. Do you know what it means when a baby desaturates? Silence. I met her eyes. Because I do. I know what it sounds like when my son stops breathing. I know what it feels like to pump milk through tears while praying he survives another hour. And I know exactly what it means when a grown man lies about where he is while his child is fighting for life. Elise stepped back slightly, her face paling. I didn't know she started. You did, I cut in. You just didn't think I would. There was a pause, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or shame. Then she nodded, quietly. I'm sorry, she said. For what? I asked. For showing up here with a gift bag like this is some kind of brunch? Or for thinking you could walk into my baby's recovery room and pretend you weren't part of the reason his father was never here? She didn't respond. I stood up slowly, cradling Theo in one arm, and handed her the gift bag back. You don't get to be part of this story, I said. She took the bag, hesitated, then left without another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the monitors, counted the seconds between breaths, and thought about all the moments Jordan had missed. Not just physically, but emotionally. Spiritually. As a father. And now I knew it wasn't just fear or discomfort. It was a choice. A pattern. A betrayal deeper than I'd imagined. The next morning, I confronted him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply showed him the iPad. The messages. The selfie. And then I told him something that made him finally look like he understood what he'd done. I hope you had a good game, I said. Because you just lost everything. He laughed. You're being dramatic, he said. We're all under stress. You'll see things differently when Theo's out. And then, as if to prove his detachment, he added, besides, what are you going to do? You need me. But he was wrong. So wrong, because the only thing I needed now was a lawyer. The first time I said the word divorce out loud, I was holding a breast pump in one hand and my phone in the other. I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was disintegrating. But even in that raw, hollow space, I knew this was the only way forward. The lawyer's voice was calm, efficient. She asked me how long we'd been married. If we had any assets. If there were signs of infidelity, define signs, I said. She didn't laugh. She asked about children, and I told her, one. A newborn. In the NICU. Then she paused. Do you want to keep your married name? She asked, and that question, of all things, undid me. I hadn't cried in days. Not since Elise stood in front of me pretending she didn't know she was a villain in someone else's story. Not since Jordan called me dramatic for confronting the truth, but that question, do you want to keep his name, hit like a blade. Because it wasn't just a name. It was the name I'd imagined my son scribbling in kindergarten. The name I thought we'd build a future on. The name that sat on every piece of mail from the hospital, every form, every record. I looked at Theo. His tiny chest rising under a mess of wires, and I said, no. I don't want anything of his. That night, I told Jordan I wanted a separation. Not a trial. Not a break. A clean start. He didn't take it well. You're insane, he said. You want to do this while our son's still in the hospital? You left him in the hospital, I shot back. He rolled his eyes. Don't be dramatic. That word again. Dramatic. Like all this, the betrayal, the lies, the abandonment, was a play I had written and he was merely an unwilling actor, but then he said something that made my blood run cold. If you're trying to make me look like a bad father in court, just remember, I have money. You don't. He said it so casually. Like it was a fact. Like money could overwrite everything. Like it could drown out monitors and tear-stained pillows and broken vows. I didn't answer. Instead, I did something he never expected. I started documenting everything, every missed visit, every message, every receipt, every witness. I asked the NICU nurses to note in the chart when he didn't show up. I copied texts. I saved timestamps, because this wasn't just about leaving a man. This was about protecting a child, and yet, somehow, Jordan still didn't take me seriously. He showed up to the hospital twice in the next week. Once with a fresh haircut and a Starbucks cup. Once wearing a new golf polo. Each time, he acted like nothing had changed, but the nurses had. They stopped calling him first. They asked me what to do. And when they spoke to him, it was clipped, distant. Like they were watching him too now. Like they saw the cracks of the shift. Became obvious the day a NICU volunteer approached me gently and whispered, "If you ever need a statement about how often you've been here, I'd be happy to give one." That same day, I got a call from our pediatric social worker. She wanted to discuss discharge planning for Theo. I told her I was moving into my sister's place temporarily, that Jordan and I were separating, and that I would be primary caregiver. She didn't blink, she just nodded and said, "Good. You've already been doing it alone." It was the first time I felt seen, and it gave me the strength to do what came next, because while Jordan thought this story was about inconvenience and resentment, I knew it was about survival. Not just Theo's, mine too, but just when I thought I had seen the worst of him, an email landed in my inbox, and it wasn't from Jordan. It was from his mother, and she had opinions. The subject line read, "For the sake of the family." I knew who it was before I opened it. Jordan's mother, Susan. She hadn't visited Theo once since he was born. Hadn't texted. Hadn't called. Not even a card. But now, suddenly, with lawyers involved and the truth unraveling, she had something to say. Her message was polite. Cold. Sharp, but dressed in concern. She said she was heartbroken about the tension between Jordan and me. That she knew he wasn't perfect, but he comes from a long line of men who weren't taught how to show emotion. That I should have known that going in. She wrote, and I quote, "Jordan is not neglectful. He just doesn't process trauma like you do. You pushed him away. He's never handled pressure well, and you made him feel inadequate. He's acting out because he doesn't feel safe with you emotionally." Then the kicker, "I'm not saying you're a bad mother. But perhaps this isn't the time to make everything about you. The baby should come first. If you truly loved Theo, you'd be trying to keep this family together." I reread it 3 times, then I stared at the screen, realizing exactly where Jordan learned to twist guilt into language so sharp it could cut you open without leaving a mark. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the email. I added it to the folder. The same folder that now contained over 50 pages of documentation, dates, photos, witness statements, message logs, and now, one scathing manifesto from a woman who had never once asked how her grandson was doing. The next day, I sat across from Jordan in a mediation room. He wore the same smug look he always did when he thought charm could win him something. His lawyer smiled like this was all a silly misunderstanding. Mine did not. We presented the file. Every absence. Every excuse. Every message to Elise. Every receipt from the bar on the night of Theo's lowest oxygen dip. The nurse's letters. The volunteer's statement. And the email, from Susan, highlighted and tabbed. Jordan didn't smile after that. He tried to interrupt. To explain. It's been hard for me too, he muttered. No one gives men space to grieve. My lawyer, without blinking, said, this isn't about grief. This is about abandonment. In the end, he agreed to joint custody on paper, but visitation would be determined by the pediatrician's sign-off. And we both knew what that meant. He wouldn't pass the screening, not without showing up. Not without learning how to hold his own child without flinching. The day Theo came home, it was just me and my sister waiting at the hospital doors. She held balloons. I held the car seat. Theo was still so small he looked like a doll tucked inside a cocoon of blankets. As I buckled him in, I whispered, we made it. We drove away from the hospital, from the machines and the beeping and the ghost of a man who never learned how to love without being the center of the story, changed. My last name a month later. Theo stays the same, for now. Until he's old enough to decide for himself, but every day, when I look at him, I know this, he will never have to question who showed up. Who stayed. Who fought, because love isn't about grand gestures or last-minute gifts, it's about sitting beside a plastic incubator when everyone else walks away. It's about showing up at your worst, not just when it's convenient, and it's about knowing when to close the door on someone who mistook silence for strength, and strength for stubbornness. Let them call me dramatic, I call it survival.